Just want to. Well, the idea is, of a circle is we can start the circle by holding hands. So let's try to do that. With a little sage burning in the middle. Okay. So I started working on Messages for Humanity about 5 years ago. I actually came to Mount Shasta 16 years ago and had some property north of Weed. It burned last summer. But for those 15 years, I was very isolated. And so I guess you could say I had 12 years of solitude sitting there staring at the mountain out of 15 years. I mean, I got to go to town, but most of the time I was out there by myself. I guess I moved from the East Coast and I was reinventing myself. It took a lot longer than I thought it was going to take. But then the fire, first I was locked in, like the energy just conspired to keep me isolated. And then the fire came and it pushed me out. So it was like being in a womb and then being born. And during that time, about 5 years back probably, I got this pneumonia. I was having a moment of discouragement, and I kind of said to myself in my head, well, I know I'm not going to kill myself, but maybe I could just get sick and die. And so pretty soon I was pretty sick and almost died a few times from a pneumonia. And when I started coming out of it, it was at the point where the only time I could breathe was when I was working on my art. And the only time I could work on my art is when I could breathe. So I wasn't really sure which was which. But I started working on taking my art more seriously and developing it. And while we're talking, I'm going to pass this around. Everybody could pick one out as a gift. And if you make a donation, a percentage of it will go to Soul Connections. But I need to sign everything at the end. And so I gradually started breathing as I was working on the art. And then, why don't you come in a little bit? But then the Spirit told me that I really had two choices, right? That I could communicate or I could suffocate. And at the time, there was nobody around to communicate with. But I started writing. And I was looking for, because I mean, I pay attention to what's going on in the world, and not just CBS or Fox News, but, you know, Democracy Now! I follow Chris Hedges and Richard Wolff and Noam Chomsky and whoever else comes up along those lines. And listening to what's going on in the world for like 15 years, there was something nagging at me that there had to be some sort of theory of everything that could explain it. And if you could understand it, then that would change it. We're not going to go into the details now, but I've been in situations in my life that seemed like the only way to resolve the situation was to understand the true nature of it. And we get caught up in the way things appear. And so we don't see what's really going on because we only see what appears to us to be going on, and there's things deeper than that. And so I started searching for that, and I was writing these messages for humanity. There's basically 3 levels. Like the first level is just talking about inequality and capitalism and corporate greed and how the corporations are destroying the environment. And then I was like, no, wait a minute. It's got to be something deeper than that. There's something deeper, something underneath that. And then I started writing about like the deep state and the Illuminati and the puppet masters and people that are pulling the strings. And, you know, I thought that was the deeper level. But then I realized that's still not it. It goes deeper than that. And then I realized that it was thought forms. So certain thought forms enable the military-industrial complex, you know, corporations destroying the environment, all these things are allowed to exist by certain thought forms that are embedded in human consciousness. And how that works is that when we're born, we have this, comes with having a body, the sense of entitlement. And without the sense of entitlement, we wouldn't be here. That's what enabled us to survive. But then this sense of entitlement gets out of balance because with the environment, when we're not in harmony with the environment, we're not in harmony with the planet, because our sense of entitlement, like our right to have food, water, air, interferes with the rights of other people to have food, water, and air. And so we get this sort of like, this sense of entitlement turns into this right to dominate. So in order for us to have our life the way we have it, you know, we have to dominate these other people, and we know that we're doing that, but we reconcile it, we rationalize it, right? We just like are aware of it, but we don't think there's anything that we can do, right? And so when you come into this point where the sense of entitlement comes into a contradiction, right? Then instead of reconciling that and adapting to it, you know, you inherited money, and then you decided the best place to invest your money was growing oranges in the desert. And so you start growing oranges in the desert, and pretty soon your neighbor that's been there for generations has no water because their well goes dry because you're using so much water for your oranges. And then you become aware of that, and then you're like, are you going to stop growing oranges if your father worked his whole life to leave you this inheritance, and you have all this money tied up in these oranges? Are you going to give it up, right? Because it's a moral conflict. So then that's where the rationalization comes in, and the justification, and I have the right to grow these oranges because, you know, like that. And that's a fundamental imbalance. So the thought forms are the right to dominate, like anyone sitting in the CEO of an oil company or a tobacco company, they're have this sense of entitlement that they have the right to do what they're doing, even though there's these consequences. And they'll rationalize that with things like, well, there's too many people anyway, so why does it matter if they die of lung cancer so I can make money, right? Because there's too many people anyway. And it's a rationalization, and it's based on the idea of the right to dominate. And then the most extreme form of that is the right to kill in self-defense. And that's the thought form that enables the military-industrial complex to exist. So, and Well, what I'm saying is if we keep that thought form in human consciousness, we're enabling all that. And we need to change that thought form because we're about to self-defend ourselves to extinction. We're on the threshold of that. And so I'm going to read one of my messages for humanity.
Oh, can I add something to that?
What?
I just had a thought. Can I add something to that? Like a lot of people are so focused on like the right to bear arms and stuff. But for me, like, I believe that if someone comes into your reality to kill you, that somehow you manifested that into your reality somehow. So for me, I don't feel the need to own a gun. Like, I think that the more people focus on just bringing love, then we don't need to focus on that. We need to defend ourselves. And if you did get killed, you can't kill your soul. So it's like people live in this like need to be afraid of dying. But it's like if it happens, it happens. But it's like, is that what you're kind of saying?
Yeah, I mean,
Don't focus too much on
so what I'm going to do is read one of the messages for humanity, and then we're going to go around clockwise. And so the idea is, imagine if you had the undivided attention of the one being that we call humanity. What would you say to them? Right? And so this is the question I ask myself, and then I just start writing. And so I'm going to present a message and then go around clockwise and offer everyone an opportunity to respond to the message that I presented or present their own message. Speak to humanity as if you had their undivided attention of the one being we called humanity. And maybe we can revisit this, do this again, and people can have time to write their own messages for humanity. Come on. This is still loading. So this message that I'm going to read to you came from a dream that I had. I woke up from the dream and just started writing. The name of this one is I Had a Dream. Yo, I have spent many years studying and meditating on the idea of nonviolence. I do consider myself to be a practitioner. I have been doing research in the form of interviews and dialogue about nonviolence with people. I have been trying to find people who resonate with the idea or the ideal of nonviolence. One night, while sleeping, I had a dream. In my dream, I was at a party, and I was trying to find people who might resonate with the idea of nonviolence. I noticed a woman who was already speaking with a group of people about nonviolence. These people were laughing at her and saying, "Do you mean you're just going to let somebody kill you and you're not going to defend yourself?" The woman was trying to respond that just because she didn't want to kill in self-defense did not mean that she would not defend herself, but just not in that way. The people were laughing too hard to hear what she was saying. As I approached the group, I made eye contact with the woman, and I nodded my head as I said, "That's what I'm saying." Then the people that were laughing at her all started laughing at me and said, "Oh, we got another one." I said, "Oh, so you think that's funny? You want something to laugh at? I'll give you something to laugh at. I'm going to tell you the ultimate joke. It is the joke to end all jokes. I used to tell this joke. At least I thought it was a joke back then when I told it. People laughed. When it is told as a joke, the contradiction seems glaringly obvious. But then I realized one day that it's not a joke, and it's not funny at all. Yet, when told in all seriousness, it is hiding in plain sight and unseen and unrecognized. Okay, so you ready to hear the joke? Here's the joke. I figured out how to end all wars on earth, how to end all wars and have peace on earth. All we have to do is kill all the violent people. That is the joke. I thought that my joke was a way of I noticed nobody's laughing. I thought that my joke was a way of highlighting a contradiction. Obviously, if all the violent people were gone, then only the nonviolent people would be left. And I assumed that the nonviolent people would be those who would not kill under any circumstances, hence the contradiction. However, it turns out that many of those who claim the word nonviolence for themselves do not preclude killing as an option. I estimate that 80% of all the people who use the word nonviolent do not preclude killing in a worst-case scenario. This is not consistent with the dictionary definition of nonviolence. Webster's 1, nonviolence, the use of peaceful means, not force, the practice of refusing to respond to anything with violence. And then violence is the use of force with the intention of doing harm. A lot of times people confuse aggression with violence, because if the intention to do harm isn't there, then it doesn't fit the definition of violence. And if the right to kill in self-defense is there, it doesn't fit the dictionary definition of nonviolence. So it's been suggested to me that the correct term for what I am trying to say is pacifism. But I do not prefer this term because it seems to imply passivity, as if to indicate that the only alternative to responding to violence with more violence or counter-violence is passivity. It is surprising to me how often people assume that when I say nonviolent, that I really mean passive, which to them implies victim, as if to say that the only way to not be a victim is to be an aggressor. This was the point in my research when I first began to be aware of the gap, the dead zone, the blind spot, the black hole in human consciousness, the vast ocean of unconsciousness that lies in between the continents of either and or, the entropy of dualistic thinking. The transformation of consciousness, the quantum shift, if there even is such a thing, has to be about going beyond dualistic thinking. The human condition of today is so enmeshed in dualistic perspectives that it is virtually everywhere around us, and it's affecting every aspect of all of our reality. It may seem profoundly difficult to make this transition, yet it is really fundamentally simple. With respect to nonviolence, it is simply a matter of replacing contention with empathy. The solution to conflict is a matter of trying to understand the point of view of an adversary. When the emphasis shifts from trying to prove one's own point of view to that of trying to understand another's point of view, we are enabled to find peaceful solutions to conflicts. Otherwise, when each party is more interested in proving their own point of view than in understanding the other's point of view, then we are disabled from finding peaceful solutions. This may seem glaringly obvious, but it is appalling to see the extent to which humans become entrapped in dualistic and either-or perspectives. In order to thrive as a species, we must make this transition For myself, it is a matter of projecting my consciousness in such a way so as to imagine that I am the other person and that they are me. We often confuse between understanding and agreement. It is not necessary to agree with someone in order to understand them. Short of understanding, we end up misunderstanding, and by default, misunderstandings lead to conflicts that could have been avoided. In order to truly understand someone, we must start by respecting them. If you disrespect someone, you will never be able to understand them. Respect involves the realization that everyone, no matter what, is struggling in their own way. In summary, empathy, compassion, respect, and understanding are key to finding peaceful solutions to conflicts. These principles are applicable in any and all situations. So, after telling my joke many times, one day I suddenly realized that this is precisely the rationale behind all wars. Those people are the violent people, and we are the peaceful people. So in order for there to be peace, we need to get rid of those violent people, and then we will have peace. The net result of this is we end up killing in the name of peace, and that is called war. Underlying this rationale lies the idea that we have the right to kill in self-defense. As we march to war, this idea is the prime mover for every soldier on a battlefield. This is an idea that has had its heyday. Killing in the name of peace as a strategy may have worked temporarily for rulers such as Alexander the Great and King David, to mention a few. It did not work out so well for others. Yet, if we continue from this point to carry the banner of the right to kill in self-defense onward and further down the yellow brick road of history, it may lead to our mutual destruction. I am not challenging the idea of the right to kill in self-defense in such a way so as to claim that we or you do not have this right. I am, however, claiming that it is not a right, it is a choice. This may seem to be a semantic distinction, but it is important in the sense that rights are things which we assume to be facts, things which we take for granted, often without questioning. Choices, on the other hand, are things that imply a need to think before acting. It is important that we make a distinction that the right to kill in self-defense is an idea, not a fact. Choices, on the other hand, have consequences either way. The idea that it is a choice and not a right shifts the responsibility back to the individual. It becomes a matter of conscience. Conversely, an idea of a right that is taken to be a fact may be considered as more than just a right. It becomes a responsibility and then an obligation. And the responsibility for actions end up being removed from the individual. The individual acts as if they were, quote unquote, just following orders, and following orders because of the right to kill in self-defense, which is considered to be a fact. We do have free will, and that is the freedom to choose to kill or to choose to not kill. Let us as individuals think long and hard about the choices that we make. When a government sends its armies to war, it is virtually always described as a necessary act of self-defense. And when soldiers go to war, it is virtually always predicated on an idea that it is a matter of self-defense. Think of it, throughout history, every banner, every cause, every sword ever drawn, both offensive and defensive, labored under the cause of self-defense. It has become difficult to determine whether a threat is real or imagined. How do we determine what action is appropriate if we don't even know whether a threat is real or not? We have acquired the ability to destroy ourselves in the name of self-defense. The idea of the right to kill in self-defense has brought us to the brink of self-destruction as a species. Perhaps we need to rethink what is self and what are we defending. What is consciousness and what are rights? The idea of a government of the people, by the people, and for the people is predicated on the idea of certain unalienable rights that are given to us by God, namely the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The right to life implies air to breathe, water to drink, food to eat, and shelter. These things are necessary to sustain life. So does my right to life give me the right to tear down the forest, generate plastic with each meal, and destroy habitats of endangered species and cultures? Without realizing that we have done so, we assume that the fact of our existence automatically comes with a set of entitlements that we call rights. It seems self-evident that because I have a body, I also have the right to breathe air, drink water, eat food, and have shelter. In short, because I exist, I obviously have the right to exist. It stands to reason then that if I have the right to exist, as in to breathe, drink, eat, and have shelter, that I also have the right to bear children, the right to bear arms, the right to kill in self-defense. These are all subsets of the right to exist, and the right to exist is a subset of the fact of existence. It is also held to be self-evident that all men are created equal. Yet, in our world today, there are millions that do not have adequate air, food, water, or shelter. We consider our rights to be a matter of fact, which is self-evident and automatic. This is taken for granted to be an established fact. As we go about our daily activities, we turn a blind eye to the realization that it is virtually impossible to exercise our so-called rights without infringing on the rights of other humans, plants, animals, etc. This contradiction has become irreconcilable. The very idea of rights per se is no longer tenable. When our rights are exercised in such a way that others who are our equals are infringed upon or deprived of the self-same rights, we have a fundamental contradiction. We understand now that the laws of Newtonian physics fail at the quantum level. In the same sense as the phenomenon of our ideas, which we have assumed to be facts, are breaking down under the pressure of accelerating time, technology, and population growth. We have considered our quote-unquote facts to be immutable laws. This they are not. So if the gift of life does not come with a set of entitlements, a sort of built-in automatic eminent domain, then what does it come with and what is it? What the gift of life is and what it comes with is consciousness, awareness. With this consciousness comes free will. Free will is the freedom to choose. The freedom to choose is not an ordained right, it is an aspect of consciousness. The idea of freedom has been overinterpreted to imply that there are an infinite number of choices. This is a misconception. There is really only one choice, and that is consciousness. We can choose to be aware, or we can abstain from choosing and remain unaware. When we act out of awareness, we create harmony. When we act out of a lack of awareness, we create disharmony and chaos. Awareness leads to compassion, and compassion is the solution. What we often consider to be good and evil are simply awareness and ignorance, ignorance being the lack of awareness. When someone acts out of hatred or malice, it is not because they are evil, but because they are ignorant. They simply lack awareness or compassion. As humans, we are neither fully conscious nor are we fully unconscious. Consciousness, however, is an evolutionary process in the sense that no matter how many times we fail to choose awareness, we always have the freedom to choose consciousness. The direction of the evolutionary process is moving from unawareness towards awareness. When we lived in caves and it was winter, we did not have the right to take the skin of the bear. It was a matter of necessity, not a matter of rights. In order to survive, we evolved a culture of dominance. As in survival of the fittest, aggression became a necessary survival trait. In times of scarcity, we as individuals had to compete against each other for food and water, etc. Then each other in order to compete as groups against other groups. This type of competition we call war. Through this war, we have been naturally selecting for aggression. This aggression has enabled us to be successful to the extent that we have become the dominant species on Earth. In effect, we have been too successful for our own good. Inherent in our success lie the seeds of our potential failure as a species. In terms of geological time, we have but a virtual instant to change from a spirit of competition to that of cooperation. Not the cooperation within a group as against another group, but cooperation as a species, as a whole, no longer divided within itself. We are like the baby that first learned to communicate, to survive by crying to get its way. All of a sudden, virtually overnight, this skill no longer serves. If we continue crying to get our way, no one wants to hear it. Our asset has become a liability. In order to survive, the baby needs to unlearn the behavior that enabled it up until that point. This is not a discussion about right and wrong. In the caves, without aggression, we were at an evolutionary dead end. Aggression was the skill set required to enable us to survive back then. Today, however, the skill set of aggression has become our greatest liability. If we fail to transcend, to transform, to transmute this aggression into a spirit of cooperation and communication, we are again at an evolutionary dead end. You may wish to argue at this point that survival of the fittest and competition is a force of nature, and that we are but an extension of that force. This idea is no doubt true to an extent. However, if we continue as if we were dogs fighting over bones, our future is dubious at best. Beneath the veil of a civilized world and a civilized society, we still live in a dog-eat-dog world in many ways. No other species of on Earth is capable of the type of wanton destruction that humans inflict upon each other and their environment. Dog-eat-dog is the default setting for the human condition. It is only through conscious awareness and reasoning that we have the potential ability to evolve a new skill set that may be appropriate for our modern era. So you want to go clockwise and see if anybody has any messages for humanity or any comments?
I have some thoughts.
Yes, please.
A friend of mine is really sympathetic towards Israel, and we were having a discussion about what you're talking about in regards to the, I'm going to take this with me, self-defense. And it got to the point where she was equivocating like self-defense to be like any kind of situation of threat that was interpreted in the mind. And so it was like, okay, well then now that becomes like violence in a sense. But when you're talking about like the way that beasts of the field behave towards one another, it's obvious that like it's embedded into nature, sort of the, I guess the archetype or the meme or the, you know, like the matrix of nature. But as we've accelerated with technology, obviously there's got to be a point of no return if we keep behaving that way. So something shifted in consciousness, obviously. But I don't know how you get humanity to do something like that without, in instances with human beings, as either a Mexican standoff or a martyr or something of that ilk. I don't know how a whole population decides to change that, you know. I just have thoughts. I don't have any specific words for, but yeah, those are my thoughts. So.
Yeah, we can get into that.
Yeah. But you.
What?
If you have something you want to say.
Yeah. Yeah, we can think whatever we can think, but doesn't matter what we think. Somebody controlling this world. Somebody choose for us what to study. And those who choose that are the cause for that insanity and humanity. Self-defense, like you said. There is no such thing as self-defense. We don't need that. We are pieces. We are humans. No one jumps on one another and eats for no reason, but the fear is embedded by those who control. So until they control that world, we have no choice, unless those who control will be wiped out. That's all.
Okay, well, I'm saying that we do have a choice, but we'll get into that. I'm saying that it's thought forms. Those people that are, I would call the puppet masters is what you're referring to. Underneath that is thought forms that enable them. They're enabled by thought forms.
For that reason, you need us to unite.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
so, but how can we unite?
That's what we're here for.
Yeah.
That's what we're doing. Everyone needs to take personal responsibility for what's going on.
People already
For all
corrupted.
humanity. What?
People already grew into this world the way they already establishing. When you grew that way, you produce that particular products, particular fruits. So this fruit is already embedded. So in order to take it out, you need to start a new generation.
Yeah? Okay. Well, that's what we're doing.
Yeah,
That's why we're here.
yeah, that's for you.
I would like to just share that in this community center, we just welcome all beings and empower them to shine their lights, share their unique gifts. And so if we each take the little opportunities in each day to maybe put a smile on someone's face, say something kind, it's those little things that add up and create a ripple effect that goes off into the entire world.
I'll just say, I think one thing that's been humbling me a lot is the concept of dark and light. And one thing that you said is that, or actually someone asked me recently, is murder wrong? And I had already I'm already like becoming more aware of the fact that how we create our reality isn't bad within the dark and light. And so I had to rewatch a video where I'm learning more about like how we create our reality, and I just thought like how you were saying how like if someone murders someone, it's coming from a place of unconsciousness, ignorance. And so if we have more awareness that the actions of others are coming from there's an underlying cause of that. Like you never know if that person has been hated on, or maybe they were off guard and they just took on so much around them that it caused them to act out of violence. Or there's people that come here from just places where all they knew was love and light, and so they want to experience darkness. And there's a way to experience darkness without it being an experience that's not necessarily wrong. So if the person learns their lessons through that experience, then it is a good thing. It's a positive thing. So to say that murder is wrong, I don't necessarily believe that it's wrong. I think it's wrong in a sense that if you're conscious and aware, but if you're not But if you're conscious and aware, you wouldn't want to murder somebody. You wouldn't want to do that. So I think that I agree with that 100%, like having more compassion, having more understanding, and the more we can hold space for the darkness, the more it could really shift the planet from this, what I find even more dense than people that act out of violence is criticism and judgment. Like projecting a lot of, like if someone does something wrong, just projecting a lot of judgment on that person. That is what's heavier and more dense than crime. So that's where I agree with that. So that's basically what I was saying.
Yeah, I prefer not to characterize right and wrong. I just say that there's things that are harmful and there's things that are beneficial. And then there's a hidden advantage in every disadvantage. And there's a hidden disadvantage in every advantage.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm trying to say.
Thank you.
It's a topic that bothers all the humanity and a lot of people for a long, long time. And for me personally, it was to wake up humanity, to wake up the heart vibration, to understand that we don't need to be greedy. We don't need really much. That happiness is inside our own relationships with God's force and how the creation was from the beginning. But as we know from all the history of all the existence of universe and humanity, there will be always samsaric karmic circles that someone who need to experience is creating this aggression and this a kind of educational system that screwed up the main relationship between humanity and the earth, between humanity and the force of God. And so for me, it was a big losing to everyone to wake up. And with time, I start to understand to wake up humanity, it's personal desire to not see violence, personal desire to see people happy, which is just my personal desire. And as more people will unite with that desire to wish good for someone and understand that someone vibrates the same force as everyone does, and we just experience different unique path and journey in this planet, then I would say waking up comes from inner awakening of happiness and love inside, and treating each other like you want to be treated, treating people, understanding that you're all one, there's no separation. And that goes back into education, because that's where the core of changing everything or building new civilization comes from. And it's, as I always was repeating on this planet, we build it and then we get into destruction, self-destruction, and then we destroy everything to learn the lesson, and then we build it again. And this has been that what humanity repeats again and again and again. And everybody who is here right now, most of the people who came to experience, observe, or get involved in that. And that's the biggest thing that happening for many, many to understand. And as soon as each individual's path will be waking up within with the reality and truth of God's creation, and pass on to the new future generation, we can bring the peace in the base of foundation of this creation. And that requires desire to want to wake up. You can't wake up someone who didn't come here to wake up. You can't wake up someone who needs to sleep and not be wake up, but have that time to heal and be in that piece of darkness. And everything comes from the darkness with light. So that is balance of this life and existence that we need to accept, that there is darkness, there is people that came to do war, that there's a spirits in this world that want to have a war for specific reason to learn the lesson. And by the respecting that, as long as we let go inside, we not experience this around our zone in a circle. And everything goes back into the force, the beginning of creation. Why we want to create, why we want to have specific vibrations and life experiences. And that comes for every individual with negotiation with God's force and who they really are and what they're doing on this planet. Because everything and anything exists that we allow in our brain, that we allow in our heart and existence. And as long as we understand that, we are in the control of create anything we want. And so as more people unite together that want to vibrate in love vibration and that tired of violence and tired of killing and tired of seeing suffering and pain, as better we can actually find the foundation of creating new life with love. And it's very important in understanding of unity of humanity, how powerful we are. We are all God's creation, except those that are robotically made. So, but anyway, so my biggest goal desire for all the humanity to achieve that state of happiness and connection to the earth and the God's creation. So, yeah, much love and light to every heart on this planet. Я переведу. Это как бы message humanity, человечеству.
Я молюсь за мир во всем мире, за любовь в каждом сердце человека. И пусть Бог благословит.
And she's praying to blessings to every human being in the heart.
И спасибо тебе, Худ, за твои старания.
And thank you, Hood, for your input into this kind of vibration.
Они нужны людям.
It's
Thank you much.
for the people, and it's needed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Who posed this question to me about messages to humanity over a year ago. And everything I've thought of or written since then was basically that, but I never put it into messages to humanity format. Something that I wanted to say I appreciate everybody's thoughts and perceptions that they shared, and I feel that there's a common thread that they're each kind of pieces of one big thing. I mean, we are pieces of one big thing, and I feel that we have a unanimous understanding about what the core of it is, and each one has a finger on, you know, one little piece of this ball. I'm interested, you know, in the day when people don't have to think about it. They look at each other and instantly know, and they understand even from a mathematical standpoint that we are all literally related. I started doing a genealogy project that my mom got me into, and she linked us. We discovered some links in our family tree that were surprises to me, and they changed the way that I saw myself, and they changed the way that I saw what we're creating. When I was able to look back, it gave me a different view looking forward. And I have to allow myself to think in terms of, you know, that there will be generations, you know, and us standing in our organic humanity and protecting our essence, and you could call that our bloodlines. And what I mean by that is being from the earth and of the earth, and trusting in the earth and all the things that it has to offer. And, you know, in our family, I got on this program, FamilySearch.com, and that's where I was finding all of these links. And so far I've asked 5 different friends for, you know, if we could find their family on FamilySearch.com. And these are people that I've known over the span of over 10 years, that vary from, you know, in the ways that I know each of these people. And out of these 5 people, I was able to find 3 cousins. That completely unlikely, you know, that stemming back to England, and just by the variation of the pool that I was coming from, I was like, it's impossible for us not to all have, you know, crisscrossed all over the world, bringing, you know, all of these talismans and, you know, whatever you call magic or culture or, you know, languages and connections and stuff. And we're all coming from this different place. And we've always, you know, throughout time, everybody's had a finger, you know, on this ball. It's our feet standing on whatever cosmology you wanna call it to. There's still a mathematical fact of our connection. And so ever since then, I've been living in reverence of that connection, and in my experience, you know, I've lost some people close to me that have pulled a piece of me with them to having a different view of whatever you want to call the next world or the return to source or something like that. And it just made me realize how dear everything is, all of our connections, and every moment, you know, making every moment as rich as we can, and having reverence for, you know, you get to talk to your cousin again, and, you know, in a past life, you were siblings. You know, that's what I've seen again and again and again in doing this physical record-keeping work. It changed the way I saw those people who were once friends, who became cousins. But then when I looked up at what our common link was, and I saw we were brothers, that changed the way I saw everybody. And I started to see greatness. You know, there's nobody here that isn't part of what we all are. You know, nobody's excluded, and we're in the belly of a beast. You know, and I just, I feel like the best thing that I can do to actualize these principles, you know, is just, it's in my eyes. I don't have to think about it anymore. It's in my eyes and how I see people. And there's no need for any rules and things I'm going to do. I do it when I'm at the grocery store, you know, and somebody's standing behind me or in front of me or next to me, and you know, just kind of exuding a goodness and a compassion, and, you know, not feeling the need to dominate, you know, with my thoughts or my personality, but just, you know, be a safe place. I realize, and I shared this just recently in another place, but what most of us need, you know, in order to kind of open up a little bit to being able to feel safe, is just somebody to be nice to them on their first day of school. So I feel that's probably the greatest thing that we can offer the most amount of people, is just, you know, finding that peace and connection and reverence for our big family.
What's this about? I don't even know what you're filming or what you're doing.
What's the messages for humanity?
Round table discussion.
I just
Round table discussion about some of the ideas that he was conveying.
Yeah, I just got here, so.
Okay.
So well, number one, I don't want to be filmed.
I read it to you in the laundromat.
I don't want to be filmed, and then I'm not sure what the context is. I'm just getting a grip on the context.
Can I add something?
So I'll have to pass on the moment. Thank you. Thank you for offering.
Yep.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So, when I was talking about, like, is murder wrong? And I'm exploring, like, I'm learning more, so I'm just, like, processing. But when someone said, is murder wrong? What I was saying is that if someone experiences murder, they allow that into their experience from something. So, if they learn the lesson with that, even if this has carried on over thousands of years or many lifetimes of murdering each other, time is really an illusion. But if once they learn the lesson of that, the depth of the light that can be gained from that can be very powerful. So that's why I'm saying, like, is it wrong if the lesson gained from it could turn into something really beautiful? And if it being mutually an agreement to experience that together of being murdered and killed versus being the victim and getting out of that, like, nobody's a victim. We all, like, participated in this reality of experiencing love versus hate. And if we learn to see things from a higher perspective, we would learn to see that we're not necessarily this body, we're just like energies clashing with each other. And when we finally just see, like, a way to bridge those energies versus fight it, the darkness that is alchemized from that makes the light that much more powerful. So that's kind of what I was trying to say. Like there's also, like, beings that come to this world that have never experienced the dark, so they don't know what injustice is, and so they have to experience injustice to know what justice is. They have to experience being killed to have that sensation, like, of feeling what it's like to be more physicalized. Like, there's just, like, so many scenarios of lessons that people go through of dark and light. And if we judge it as bad or wrong, we don't know what that soul may have agreed to experience that to grow in a way beyond what we can even imagine. So that's what I'm learning right now, is, like, not to judge each person's experience,
What's your name?
Viola.
Violet? Viola. Okay. You and Inga said some very similar things, so I wanted to share an experience. I guess you could say I had a near-death experience, but nothing actually happened to my physical body. But once I experienced being in the other dimension, I didn't want to come back, and I was very obstinate about that and determined that I wasn't going back. And after 5 days without sleeping or eating or drinking water, I finally came to the conclusion that there was nowhere else for me to go. I wasn't dead. I wasn't even wounded. And once I came to that understanding, I asked God, basically. I said, so, okay, I get it. I have to go back. But before I go back, can I ask a question? And the answer was, as long as you don't want to, you have to. But only until you want to. Because once you want to, you won't have to anymore, but you will anyway. Oh, I got that. I got to reverse my order here. The first thing I asked, the question that I asked was, before I go back, God, can you just explain one thing to me, right? I said, what is the meaning of suffering? Like, why is there suffering? And the answer was that no one suffers any more than they need to find compassion. And some people need to suffer more than others, but no one ever suffers more than they need to find compassion. And then they told me, as long as you don't want to, you have to but only until you want to, and then once you want to, you won't have to, but you will anyway. So that's kind of like the riddle of existence, right? But the way I would is that I would say that suffering is the grist mill for compassion. So there's a relationship between suffering and compassion. We create suffering for ourselves because we need to learn compassion. And so let's say somebody goes through some suffering and it makes them very angry, and so then they create more suffering. And then they get more angry and create more suffering until you reach a certain point where it breaks through to compassion. And that may take lifetimes. But it's the realization of compassion that breaks the pattern.
Can I add to that? That's kind of, what I was like, speaking out about, like, how can you know what justice is without experiencing injustice? Is that people who come from higher dimension realities and they've never experienced the darkness, they don't know what compassion is because they don't need compassion where they're from. They don't need to feel sadness or grief or any of those emotions. So a lot of people that have come from these higher dimensions did come to this planet and learn, and by experiencing suffering, that's what, like, it's the same along the lines of experiencing justice to know what justice is. You got to experience suffering to know compassion. So, yeah.
So, but I am saying that we're at a threshold point for humanity on Earth that we need to kind of move to the next level in order to be sustainable as a life form on this planet. So the idea that there's always going to be this certain level, of conflict, that we kind of need to outgrow that in order to survive as a species. So yes, somewhere in the universe there's always going to be this level of the physical reality and the creating the suffering, but if it continues to be here, it's not going to be here because we're going to destroy it all.
Yeah, we need that balance of dark and light. It's too extreme, so we need that balance now.
Well, it's an evolutionary process, but then we need to evolve through that process, right? So if we don't make this transition in our thought forms, right? And so how the brother that was here before was talking about that it's already set a certain way and we can't change it, but this is how we can change it. So there's something I call the two opposing laws of attraction. And so in magnetism, opposites attract and like forces repel. And in harmonics, like forces attract and opposites repel. And these two opposing laws of attraction are operating simultaneously in any situation. So then you have harmonic resonance, or I would refer everybody to check out Rupert Sheldrake, who talks about biomorphic morphogenesis. He's the one that coined the idea of epigenetics. But how it works is, like, let's say I have an empty room and I have a violin over at this end of the room and another violin over at this end of the room, and I pluck the B flat string on this violin, and the frequency, because it's a certain frequency, goes across, and when it hits the other violin, the B flat string resonates and makes sound. It vibrates and makes sound. So that's if you have one violin. If you have 10 violins over at the other end of the room, then you have 10 violins making sound, or 100 violins, or 1,000 violins. So we're like we're like the violin. So we're like transmitters and receivers, and we send out frequencies, right? And so when I send out a love frequency, it goes to the other violins and it resonates with their love string, right? When I send out anger, it resonates with other people's anger string. And there's a cumulative effect to all this.
Like if you send out anger, it just builds because you're connecting to that energetic field.
Yeah. So this is how we actually can change things. And so we have this website. I was just reading from the messages from humanities section of our website. It's uugccr.com. It's about nonviolence and shifting thought forms in human consciousness so that we don't destroy ourselves. And we encourage people to imagine that you have the undivided attention of the one being we call humanity, and what would you say to them? And we also have a section where we have declarations of nonviolence. And so we're asking everybody to write their own declaration of nonviolence. And because when you do that, it's a process that we're encouraging people to engage in the process of thinking. Okay? And so when you think about something, you meditate on an idea, right? You are thinking inside the collective consciousness of all humanity. Okay, and so that's sending out a frequency, right? If you like have something you didn't think about very long, like if somebody says to you, well, if somebody's trying to kill you and the only way to stop, if it appeared to you as if somebody was trying to kill you, and it appeared to you as if the only way to stop them from killing you is to kill them before they kill you, what would you do? Right? And the key word is that if it appeared to you. We're describing the appearance of an either-or situation. Either you kill or you die. Right? But there's no such thing as an either-or situation, because creativity is that there's at least one more possibility. There's never only two possibilities, and that's an illusion that we get trapped in. Right? You see, beyond that illusion is, no, those aren't my only two choices, killing or dying. Right? And by thinking about it, thinking about the ideas that are presented in the website and attempting to write your own declaration, you're thinking inside the collective consciousness of all humanity, and that has a cumulative effect. Rupert Sheldrake doesn't, he has another take on the 100th monkey theory of consciousness, which is that there's a critical mass, that if a certain number of people all send out this frequency of love or compassion, then just like the 100th monkey, that everyone all of a sudden would have that, everyone else would all of a sudden have that realization. And that we just haven't reached that level. Rupert Sheldrake said it's not a critical mass, it's an evolutionary process. Okay, so it's about shifting the thought forms. Every time one person lets go of the idea of the right to kill in self-defense and has the realization, or maybe I should tell a quick story. So I had a friend, his name was Alabama, and he was an older brother, and you could see in the lines in his face that he'd been through a lot of things in his life. And he came up to me and he said 3 sentences. But I could see that he'd been through a lot of things, but that all that was left, he'd let go, everything else was gone, and all that was left of him was compassion. So he was a pure being of compassion at that point in his life. And he came up to me and he said, he said, before I became like I am now, I was a real badass. Right? That was the first sentence. Second sentence was, in fact, I killed someone. Right? And then his third sentence was, "I'm going to die saving somebody's life." And then a few years later, he ended up in a situation where there was some people disagreeing, and there was one guy that wanted to kill this other guy, and he was hiding out. He had the gun. He was hiding in the bushes, and the people were keeping the other guy inside his house and bringing him his groceries so he didn't go outside. And Alabama was there, and he saw the opportunity that he was waiting for. And he walked over to the coat rack, and he took the other brother's coat and hat. And he knew that the guy that was hiding in the bushes with the gun was his bro, his friend. Well, so he knew where he was hiding. And so he made that brother think that he was the person that he wanted to kill. And he walked in front of the bush, and the guy jumped out from the bush and shot his best friend in the back, thinking that it was the other person. And I think that he had learned something very important. Edgar Cayce talks about there's two laws. There's the law of karma and the law of grace. And the law of karma says that, well, if you killed somebody, then you're going to have to come back and be the one being killed, right? That's karma, right? He said, but you're only subject to the law of karma until you find grace, which is the realization of compassion. So once you find that, then you're no longer subject to the law of karma. You're subject to the law of grace. And so he was transforming his whole reality. He understood that, well, because he created something in this life, he was going to have to come back and work it out in the next life, and he decided not to wait. And so he created a situation where he can have a better opportunity for an incarnation and not have to. He changed it. It's like at any moment in time, we have these patterns, and we have the choice to keep repeating the same patterns over and over again, generation after generation. But at any point, we can change that. And how we change it is by the realization of compassion. And that breaks the cycle. So that's how we can break the cycle of what the brother who left was saying. We can break that cycle by sending out that frequency. And so that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get everyone to think inside the collective consciousness of humanity and to send out this frequency.
There was a few terms that I felt needing maybe some distinction. So I've written a declaration of nonviolence, a declaration of sovereignty, and what was the other one?
Would you like to read yours? I have it right here.
I want to put these people through that.
We have 40 minutes.
We need to go.
What?
I gotta take care of my mom, so we gotta go. So thank you so much.
Thank you for coming.
It's good to see you guys.
Oh.
I just wanted to say that some of the considerations that I was taking in and spending some time with when I was working on this, I think it took me like a year when he first posed it until the time I actually put it out, because I had some concepts that that were kind of getting in the way of me making a declaration on paper. And one of the things that he returned to was the definition of murder is it contains the intent to kill or harm somebody.
Violence.
Violence. But and we are talking about basically going to that full end of the spectrum, in a self-defense situation. And over the time that I was having these considerations, I'm like, well, I'm a mother of 3 children, and if anybody comes between me and my cubs, I'll rip their face off. But at the same time, I'm not just going around thinking I'm going to rip somebody's face off. It has to do with, how I would respond, in that situation. But whereas violence is a preemptive concept that you wish harm on another person, and I don't wish harm on a single person. So there was some distinctions. I can't think of any other ones. But yeah, that kind of brought me to the realization, that Karen's Declaration of Nonviolence and Independent Sovereignty. I declare I'm an independent sovereign individual whose power and authority is derived directly from grand central source, origin point of creation, and the ensuing mind spring prime creator. I claim my unalienable right to live, cultivate, pray, practice, and serve in honor of the divine, provided it does not cause harm, loss, or injury to others. I am an extension of the great mystery, born natural unto this terra firma, a natural being, a spirit-embodied entity that submits to no metastatic artificial matrix that is governed by use of the threat of violence and that which is anti-life. The virus of fear that creates violence in this realm creates a disassociation between the brothers and sisters who also emerged and were immediately blindsided by the circumstances of the virus, held apart by their perceived differences, the idea that the other is somehow responsible for the circumstances that bind us in some way. The virus influences the mind to perceive threat and separation between self and other. To respond in kind is to bond with the virus and perpetuate the effects in material form. And then this is a quote: evoking the presence of great compassion, let us fill our hearts with our own compassion towards ourselves and towards all living beings. Let us pray that all living beings realize that they are all brothers and sisters, all nourished from the same source of life. That's a Buddhist prayer. Violence cannot be ended by stifling thoughts or actions, as it is the action taken in powerless disconnect. A trainee of nonviolence honors a commitment to maintaining their connection to divinity and remembering the truth of vibration and its eternal existence, and evolve past the thinly veiled cannibalism of fear-based domination, which threatens our world with extinction. We are at a turning point where we must either become superconscious or cease to exist. We cannot live life afraid, with a loaded gun in our head and intent to use it. It's the weakest tool of option for our survival. Our eternal souls cannot afford this paradigm, and for what we do not know and are unable to know, will offer a reckoning, if it should happen, of things which cannot be undone. A heavier weight that a moment could allow me to process. Our greatest tool against the virus is to stand in our divinity and to have courage in knowing and demonstrate the exercise of the eternal soul in order to disarm the virus. The virus responds to the belief it is under attack. The virus leaves us weak and powerless and behaving like cornered animals. The counterbalance to the virus is universal unconditional compassion. Creations are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to transform them. Reality is boundless. I vow to perceive it. The awakened way is unsurpassable. I vow to embody it. And that is the 4 great bodhisattva vows.
So, could you define what you mean by the virus? What is the virus?
I would associate words. Hold on a second. I would associate words that are contained within the energy behind colonization. And the term Wetiko virus has been used for a entitled domination thought form of greed and just believing that it is within its right to take which is not theirs. And this extends into what we believe about human life. And when we believe that we can take it, we see life as a material thing and not a divine thing. And therefore, maybe it needs more explanation, but we see ourselves as material things and not divine things. And so that is why connection to maintaining awareness of our connection to this place and our natural matrix that has been stamped on top of or has a transparency of an artificial matrix on top of it, that what we actually are is the natural connection and that we're rooted here. And yeah, if we have that knowing and we've been transformed by that knowing, and that's intrinsic and natural to our thought process, other things, the idea of being threatened actually crosses your mind less because you know that you're here for something else, that there's nothing that threatens the authenticity of who and what you are. You hold a specific place, and so does everybody else. And also, in knowing your own self and being confident in your own self, you're less likely to even have a reaction when you're presented, with a, I'll just say a situation.
Adversity?
Say again?
Adversity?
Say it one more time.
Adversity.
Adversity, yes, yeah. You're more likely, rather than responding to a situation with violence, which is the outward behavior of being threatened, you respond to it in confidence and disarm it in other ways. And so, one of the things that Hoot was touching on was it's not always a 1-2 this or that kind of a thing. We have. It's never. We as creative humans and compassionate humans, we're pulling all kinds of stuff at different times that you don't know that you're walking around with, But in the moment that you need it most, you may respond in ways that surprise yourself that you can't plan for, and disarm the situation completely just by the look on your face. Just one potential.
I call that psychic Tai Chi. So, yeah, we could do another session about that's another whole subject. But basically, it's something I learned from being in situations. And first of all, it's never either or. Like, duality is an illusion. We're trapped in this illusion of duality. And in order to see beyond it, we have to get past the idea that it has to be either or. I mean, quantum physics showed us that. They had scientists that said light's a wave, and then they had other scientists that said light's a particle. And so these scientists did experiments that proved that it was a wave, and these other scientists did experiments that proved that it was a particle. And then Einstein came along and said, well, no, it's both a wave and a particle. And now the next level beyond Einstein is that it's neither a wave nor a particle.
Exactly.
And it's the oscillation. Light is the oscillation back and forth between the particle nature and the wave nature. And how that goes to identity, when you hear people talk about, or various religions or spiritualities will say that somehow you have to overcome the ego, you have to transcend the ego in order to find this oneness, and that individuality is something you have to get rid of in order to have this experience of oneness, right? But they're actually two sides of the same coin. They're just like light is a wave and a particle. We could see that in light, but it shows us how everything is. So, like, individual identity is meaningless and out of balance without being tempered by the realization of oneness. And the realization of oneness isn't anything without individuality. So it's two sides of the same coin that are inseparable. So how the psychic Tai Chi comes in is, so imagine you have a blind person that has an acute set of hearing. And so psychic Tai Chi is like, I've been in situations where if I had engaged on the physical level to try to defend myself, I wouldn't be here having this conversation. And there was no physical way out of the situation. And so how it works is, I was in this situation and I just thought about it and I said, you know, if I could understand, something doesn't add up, this either or thing that I was experiencing. It's either this or this. And if I could understand this, it's like there's a missing piece. It's like I'm looking at a bomb and I have to figure out which wire to cut. If I cut the wrong wire, then the bomb goes off. Right? And if I could understand how it works, that would be all it would take. It's just the act of perception is enough to diffuse it. So perception plays a proactive role in creating and manifesting that which is being perceived. And it's something that we don't realize when we're caught in this duality. We think that what's happening over there has nothing to do with us, and how we perceive it has no effect on what's happening. But it has actually a very direct effect. Like, what's a good example? So I'm sitting in a park, and over there's maybe 10, 15 people in between, but over there's these two people, and they start fighting, trying to hurt each other. And I know one of them. And in fact, I felt that emotion, like that person was really asking to get hurt, and was, you know, and I didn't want to be the one to do it, right? And then I'm looking over there at him, and I was, oh, he's finally getting it, you know, and the fight intensifies. Or I look over there and I say, oh yeah, I know that guy. I know he's been trying to create this situation for himself, and I see him creating it for himself right now, and I'm sorry he has to do that to himself. You know, and I wish he didn't have to do that. So instead of sending, aha, see what, you know, I'm sending compassion as a frequency to that situation. And when I send that compassion to that situation, the fight diminishes. See, now there's other people sending thought forms there too, so I'm not omnipotent that I can just, you know, the idea that we're creating our own reality it's a double-bladed sword. We are creating our own reality completely at any given moment, but that doesn't mean that all we have to do is change our idea and reality changes. It's not that simple, because we not only have a conscious mind, we have a subconscious and an unconscious mind, and then there's everybody else's mind. We're co-creating what we experience. So I don't agree with the idea that you can suddenly just by like, I'll give you an example. I'm in the park and I see somebody I know. This happened last spring. And I go up to say hello to the guy. He says, well, how are you doing? I said, oh, I'm okay. He says, you're just okay? How come you're just okay? How come you're not great? I said, well, actually, I was listening to the news this morning, and I heard about, like, 15 million people in danger of, it was last fall, in danger of starving to death this winter, you know, in Afghanistan. And he says, oh, he says, why are you thinking about that? Don't you realize that by thinking about it, you're helping to create it? And I'm not saying he's wrong, but I'm saying that's one side of the coin. The other side of the coin is by ignoring it, you're enabling it. By focusing your awareness, paying attention to what's going on, and understanding that that's not them over there and I'm over here, and what's happening to them isn't happening to me. What's happening to them is happening to everyone, right? Because we're all interconnected. I can't hurt someone else without hurting myself. Do you want to say something?
I think that when sometimes we talk about what we're focusing on, and just for the sake of conversation, using things that are dark and things that are light, I think for me personally, part of my ongoing unfolding path to having clarity about this world and my place in it is bringing those things, having these conversations and having the awareness, about things that are happening, but we're not looking at it from a sensationalist point of view, and we're not looking for for who to blame. We are looking at the great human story, and putting ourselves in people's shoes. I feel like people do that. I feel like in general people do that, when they're considering things like war and famine, starvation, and natural disasters, floods, etc. There's ways of discussing things that are like of a more constructive and let's use this and create an awareness so that we can create stronger networks and infrastructures to prepare for such situations. For instance, there's a lot of great things that humans have created over time in response to different types of situations. Just any kind of energy devices or ways of purifying water or different agricultural techniques for extreme environments and stuff like that. A lot of the wellspring of those ideas is from having these considerations because we have these deeper awarenesses, and I'm not assigning anything beyond my earthly awareness. I do personally, mentally, and spiritually take into account soul groups and karma and stuff like that. But while I'm speaking as a person in this realm who has physical hands, that can manipulate matter and communicate and receive and broadcast in this realm, I do like to. I do like to give things the attention of I'd rather not have people die.
Yeah, I have something to say about that. I think that people who have experienced violent situations in past lives, when they learn that lesson, and then I wonder, like, the people that advocate for peace the most and for nonviolence, sometimes I think that they had to go through an experience of violence to know that, because you can't have that awareness without having experienced duality. Like, you can't see something outside of your reality without having connected to that energy or observed that energy to the full extent. So I think you can participate in violence by just observing, but I think that sometimes the most powerful lesson can come from actually having experienced it and then rising above it. And then when you become an advocate for peace and you become an advocate for love and compassion, that becomes highly honorable because you chose to break the cycle and not keep repeating it. So it is very honorable to serve the light, but I also see that the darkness serves a very important purpose a catalyst, exactly. So
And I feel like, you know, in the balance of all things, it's going to exist in some form. You know. I didn't mean to cut you off.
that was all I had to say.
Yeah, I was just relating to what you're saying. You know, there's I feel like you're referencing the isness, like the things that is, and each thing has a purpose, a meaning and a purpose, whether or not it feels good. You know, I definitely honor the existence of catalysts. I've had a lot of catalysts in my life that have brought me to the realizations that I have, and I'm grateful for those things and those moments. And there's a lot of things I wish were different, but I see what you're saying.
I'm processing. Nothing to say.
Oh, I didn't think of having everybody introduce themselves at the beginning. But I'm Hoot. This is Joel over here with the camera. And
Viola.
Viola. I think that's something I'm
I
learning.
don't want to be on film.
okay.
I'll say what I'll identify myself. I just don't want to be on film.
Karen here is on the board of directors of the UGCCR. You'll see her if you go to the website and the board of directors.
I'm on the website. And my name is, I go by Karen Story. My birth name is Karen Wong. I was born in the Bay Area. I've been living in Shasta for about 10 years. I've been knowing Hoot for about 4 years now. And I've lifetimes. Hoot's brought me a lot of growth in these concepts. There's something that you mentioned earlier, which I kind of touched in on a little bit, but you posing these questions and having these discussions really has woven into my thought process, you know, and help bring focus to giving meaning to all of my thoughts and actions. And this is, you know, there's a lot of things that we can each do as individuals in between the lines of what we believe. There's actions and words and the ways that we treat every person, every individual moment. But yeah, this just asking the question, if you could, you know, address humanity as if it was one being, you know, what would you say? And that brings the conversation to deeper and deeper, wider concepts, you know, away from the, I guess I want to say the standard thought process, not that I know what other people think about, you know, but it's kind of pulled away from the superficial and the petty and the material world, and looking at like more what is our legacy, you know, and that legacy that would exist whether or not you did anything, but just in the way that you lived.
So, to what purpose does it avail one to preserve their life if it is at the price of their soul? There is no death. The energy that animates my body doesn't cease to exist when my body doesn't work anymore. Energy can be neither created nor destroyed. So, whether or not there's reincarnation there is continuance. And you can't take your body with you to the next life. You can't take your body with you. You can't take your money with you. You can't take your property with you. But you take your sum total of all your deeds with you to the next, if there is such a thing, to the next incarnation. And it sets the stage. What you do in this life sets the stage for what you're going to experience and what opportunities you can have in the next life.